Welcome, everyone, to our collaborative mentorship network for chronic pain and addiction, Collab Forum. We're really excited to have Kerry McLean here, who's going to be talking about the personal in the pandemic and getting real about our own wellness. We have a few things to go through prior to that, and I'll introduce Kerry, who you can probably see on the screen here. Next slide. Before we get started, I just wanted to do a land acknowledgement. We acknowledge that what we call Alberta is the traditional and ancestral territories of peoples presently subject to Treaty 6, 7, and 8, namely the Blackfoot Confederacy, Kainai, Piikani, Siksika, the Cree, Dene, Saulteaux, Nakota Sioux, Stoney Nakoda, and the Tsuut'ina Nation, and the Métis people of Alberta. This includes the Métis settlements and the 6 regions of the Métis Nation of Alberta within the historical Northwest Métis homeland. I would like to acknowledge and thank the many First Nations, Métis, and Inuit who have lived in and cared for these lands for generations. I make this acknowledgement as an act of reconciliation and gratitude to those whose territory we reside on, work, and visit every day. And before we get started, I'm Dr. Kathy Scrimshaw. I'm a family physician, worked in Pincher Creek, and I'm talking to you from Beaver Mines, and I'm actually on the phone, so if it looks a bit weird. I have no disclosures other than I'm a part-time and paid employee of the Alberta College of Family Physicians as a medical director. The other people you may see on the screen here include Dr. Leah Phillips, Kerry Kerry, and Agatha Grachowski, and they are all employees of the Alberta College of Family Physicians and work on the CMN. And the financial support that we receive is through a Health Canada Substance Use and Addictions Program contribution. We don't receive any other in-kind support. And just a few housekeeping items. To capture your attendance, we need you to click on the survey link in the chat, and that's the way you'll get your certificates of attendance for collecting CME or continuing professional education credits. We're going to be using the chat function to log all your questions, so please do that. You can also use the raise hand feature to ask a question, and we'll be keeping our eye on that and cueing Kerry if you have something that fits in well with the talk or what she's saying at the moment. We will be using some breakout rooms during this session as well, so watch for the join button and click it to enter those breakout rooms. And we do have some dedicated time at the end to talk about how things are going and to use Kerry's expertise and ask what questions we may have at the end. And please fill out the evaluation at the end, and also any suggestions you have for collaboration forums, please let us know. And so I get the privilege of introducing Kerry McLean, who we actually met when we presented at a community of practice that Kerry runs for harm reduction and housing through Alberta Health Services. So she obviously works for the Provincial Addiction and Mental Health Health Services, and she also has a private practice as a registered counseling therapist. She's worked in the health system for over 25 years and very interested in getting change at individual, community, and at the system level. She's very passionate about having those deep conversations that support mental health, the wellness of practitioners who provide service to others. So please welcome Kerry, and I will mute and let you proceed.
Thank you very much for that. Really appreciate that. Welcome everyone here to this conversation. Just thanks for taking time out of your busy weeks and on an evening type of thing too. So really welcome that. Just want to give a couple of quick disclosures here. You can just see there that I don't have any relationships with any sponsors. just want to let people know, obviously, as been said there in my introduction, that I kind of wear two hats. One is that I work for Alberta Health Services, but also some of my background that I'll be speaking about is that I do support people with a private therapy practice, and also the ACFP has been gracious enough to provide me with a small honorarium for tonight. So thank you very much for that. So just wanted to be transparent about that. And next slide, please. So just want to talk about the learning objectives. Just before, well, I'll go over the learning objectives and I'll kind of talk about where this presentation kind of came from. So for tonight, looking at really all of the things happening in our world, looking at our own mental health, both professionally and personally. And one of the things that I'm really big on is just how do we, kind of take care of ourselves? How do we, check in? How do we, know a few things about what's happening in our systems in terms of responding to the pandemic and how that affects us personally? We'll have a chance to be able to relate to each other. And one of the things I think, when I was thinking about, putting things together tonight is that things are really tough right now. Nobody has a magic wand. We can't just say, oh, take a yoga class and that's going to solve everything. Nothing against yoga, of course. But that I think it's really important to look at strategies and tools and techniques. And what I've tried to do, bit of an intersection of one that I started delivering at the beginning of the pandemic that was about information that I found personally really interesting in terms of understanding just this whole experience right now and how that sort of lands for us. I hope I'm coming through okay. I'm just getting a couple blips that my internet connection isn't that good. Hopefully everybody can still hear me okay there.
You froze for me briefly, Kerry. So if that happens again, maybe we can try videos off for a little while. You were coming through clear, but there was a little bit of a frozen moment.
All right, thank you. And the other thing too that I want to just say about tonight is that this is really short. I'm going to be giving you a whole bunch of stuff in about really, half an hour, 45 minutes. So hopefully you can take something away there. We're talking about a huge issue in a really small period of time. So just wanted to mention that. So next slide, please. I just wanted to have a bit of a personal connection so you know a little bit about me more than just a couple of things that were shared there. Obviously, I work for the giant megalopolis of Alberta Health Services, and I also have a clinical focus. And when I think about, kind of something more personal for myself, I'm really passionate about helping create connections for people, to help people learn to regulate themselves in terms of, how they feel in their body, to help people connect to community and to have a sense of meaning making. And I'm just sharing a slide there that's something kind of personal about me. That's my kids and my dog. We spent quite a bit of time on Vancouver Island this past summer. So I tried to add in a little bit of personal things throughout the presentation here too. So before we move to the next slide, I'm just going to invite you. I've been talking for a bit and you've been hearing things, and here you are sitting here in front of your various devices or laptop. Just invite you to be able to check in with yourself for a moment. So wherever you're sitting, if you're able to just stop for a minute and just listen to my voice. And what is it like to just pause and kind of track yourself for a moment? If you want, you can just even close your eyes, or you can keep your eyes open. What is it like to just slow down for a minute? I'm sure all of you, if you're practitioners, if you're doing, it's probably maybe a little challenging to slow down for a sec. What is it like just to connect with your breathing for a moment? And do you find checking in with yourself easy, or is it a little bit hard? Is it difficult to just kind of sit and even slow down? And just invite you tonight to just take in what you can and see how this lands for you in terms of your own life, personally and professionally. And just also invite you to notice if there's anything that arises for you or anything that kind of, comes just be mindful of that, and be happy to talk about that some more at the end, because really this is all about kind of checking in with ourselves. So next slide, please. So I just wanted to put this slide out, and just kind of a bit of commentary right now is that we have these interesting parts of duality right now going on around being professionals, being carers in the health system during a pandemic. So these are just some things to kind of tweak some different thoughts for you, and I'm sure you guys could put a whole bunch more in this. There's the request to care and be present for the work that we're doing in the health system, but don't care too much. You also have to take care of yourself. You have to kind of be a little bit distant. You have to have, healthy boundaries, all that kind of thing. That's a bit confusing. We have to be able to accept what's going on and be able to move through it. But then we also, have this feeling of, we can't just accept it and have it be easy. There's also a lot to endure right now. And we know that a lot of people are really struggling with just the ability of, showing up for work and helping others. And I know for sure that there's a lot of people doing work right now, supporting others, where it's just really hard to keep going. But at the same time, we do have the need to do the right thing. We have various ethical responsibilities. We know that people are there to be able to rely on us. We have to be able to give that kind of caring. And sometimes there's moral injury that can come from that, in terms of, that's really hard to kind of hold that. We also know too that one of the things about able to take care of ourselves, we have to be able to ask for support. We have to sometimes be open and vulnerable and kind of say what's going on for us. But then we don't always work in environments, or we don't always exist in contexts where that's always safe. Sometimes people might not understand, or you just have to get things done, or you have to kind of push things down. So it's a really, really strange kind of time right now. So one of the things I just wanted to do, if people are okay with it, I wanted to just do a really, really informal kind of a check-in for the people that are on the call. If you can just put in the chat, or I'd welcome you to even come off mute if you feel like that you want to say something. If you could say one word, maybe one or two words about how you're feeling right now in the pandemic, or personally, or just with the roles that you have. If you can just throw that up in the chat, just really, really quick description of how you're feeling right now overall. Just give that a minute. Frustrated, anxious, grateful, tired, fed up, worried. Yeah, those are, overwhelmed, resigned. Absolutely. Thank you for that, guys. And I'm sure there's probably lots more that you could add as well. So can we go to the next slide, please? So some of the things I want to talk about are kind of some concepts that might be helpful. And maybe some of you, this is quite familiar to, but I just wanted to be able to speak about this. And I offer these things in terms of, just shining a light on some of the things that we might be feeling. So overall, when you think about shock and stress responses, now everybody works in the medical system, there might be things that come to your mind about that overall, around caring for people and their bodies and whatnot. But a stress response or a shock response, what we can recognize when that's happening is things like mental fog, feeling out of your body, feeling numb, having heightened emotions, feeling disconnected from reality, that sort of buzzy feeling that we get sometimes when something big is happening. Sometimes we can't compute information. There's all kinds of that feeling of the flight, fight, freeze that can happen as well. And these are all physiological things that happen. And I also have in here kind of a collective context too. One of the things that happens with humans is that we assess our safety according to the group behavior and kind of the collective interaction of others. And so there's a lot of hypervigilance going on right now with the pandemic, and seeing others as dangerous and always having to see, am I safe? Am I not? Do I have my PPE on? All that kind of a thing. And we know that this level of activation can be really toxic after a while, because it really creates this prolonged activation of stress response in the body. And after a long time, that can be really difficult to deal with. And one of the things that I came across a while back is this concept of allostatic load. And what that is we like things to be predictable as humans. And that we know that in order to regulate ourselves, sometimes there's uncertainty in that. And so we strive to sort of reduce the uncertainty of unsure outcomes. And the concept of allostasis helps us to do that by anticipating needs and planning how to satisfy things ahead of time. But it takes a lot of energy to do that. And sometimes when we have to resolve this uncertainty, things can become chronic and result in sort of this accumulation of this allostatic load. And what allostatic load happens after a while, if it just keeps going and the load keeps growing, it reduces our ability to cope with this being able to navigate uncertainty in the future. So to me, I was like, well, that's what we've been in for a long, long time. I also came across the concept of surge capacity. And I know sometimes that's a term that we use in healthcare, but I'm just going to read out kind of a definition of that, because I thought it was really, really pertinent to around where we are right now with having been in the pandemic for a long period of time. So surge capacity is a collection of adaptive systems, physical and mental, that humans draw on for short-term survival in acutely stressful situations, such as natural disasters. The issue is that our surge capacity only allows us to adapt to major disasters if they are temporary. But of course, as we know with the pandemic, it's stretching out indefinitely. And so the emergency phase has now become chronic. So everyone's surge capacity is completely depleted, as per the words you just put up on the screen. And that
Hi, Kerry. I think you've frozen for me. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Do you know what? You froze for me for about 5 seconds. Do you mind repeating the last thing you said?
Sure, yeah. I was just finishing up the definition of surge capacity and saying how with that, because the pandemic has been so prolonged, we know that our surge capacity, it's depleted and can't be renewed. And so that's why we say that, people feel really, really quite taxed and sort of fed up right now, like the words that were said on the screen there, because we're just at this capacity sort of feeling. Did that come across okay?
That was great. Thanks for repeating that, Kerry.
Oh, great. Thanks. Sorry about that. Another concept, if we can move to the next slide, please. And some of you, I'm sure, are feeling this, is grief. And that might be in all different kinds of ways. So I have this this image here that I've seen before, and I think it's fantastic. And grief, this isn't about this can be grief for any particular kind of thing. All kinds of emotions that go along with grief. Sometimes we think that grief should be this orderly process, but I would say that graphic on the right-hand side around most people's experience right now with all of our feelings, it's all over the place. Our responses are not linear. I'm sure a lot of you have felt, even I have, sometimes where I'm doing really good, feeling energized, feeling hopeful, and then something will happen and it just throws me back into, those squiggly lines all over the place. And so we know that grief overall is a process, not an event, but we've been in this process for
All right. Do you know what? You're freezing for me again,
Oh.
Kerry. So do you know what maybe we'll do is if we could get you to turn your video off.
Sure.
Let's give that a go.
Okay.
Awesome. And then I apologize. The last thing you said was grief is a process, not an event.
Yes, and what I said afterwards, I believe, sorry about that, was that we've been in this process for a long, long time, and that we know that, just to anticipate that, probably what our experience will continue to be is kind of like the image on the right-hand side, where it's going to be bouncing around until we, you know, kind of move out of the stages that we're in with the pandemic. So we'll do the next slide, please. So just wanted to talk a bit about things that are really normal that might be happening for people. And I'm sure that this kind of reflects on some of the comments that you had made before with dealing with everything right now. So people can feel, you know, like they're kind of going backwards sometimes, even though that you've maybe coped with something or you were feeling strong. Sometimes we can go backwards, that idea of regression. I kind of talked about the mental fog that can happen and just feeling like, you know, we're not as on and capable and competent as we were before. One of the really big things too, and I see this definitely a lot in my private practice, is when we're under more stress. Like, so again, that allostatic load is just going off. We know that other stressors can amplify prior or other kind of traumas or triggers that people have. So I'm definitely hearing and seeing a lot of, you know, staff in various situations where, you know, personal things are coming up for them. They're dealing with family issues, issues with their parents or their children, and just things are a lot more difficult to kind of deal with in those ways. Anxiety, intrusive thoughts, so thoughts kind of, you know, just coming in that you have a hard time kind of managing. I'm sure there's a lot of people feeling like they just want to lay in bed all day and not get up sometimes as well. So again, that motivation, productivity. I'm not hearing that a lot of people are leaping out of bed and, you know, feeling absolutely fantastic and Pollyanna kind of feelings right now. Sometimes people are able to, you know, kind of find some relaxation and, you know, sort of shift their feelings of, you know, for those that are feeling well, kind of feeling gratitude for what they have, being able to still contribute in some kind of a way. And then the other thing that happens, I think, for people too, is just questions of purpose and meaning and kind of the larger questions in life, you know, around what am I doing? Am I doing enough? Is this what I'm supposed to be doing? How am I caring for myself? How am I, you know, sort of making sense of this? Those things can come up for people as well too. Next slide, please. One of the things I wanted to mention too, and I definitely have some colleagues that that are very passionate about this, is we use the term burnout a lot in, you know, looking at what's happening in our health system right now and anybody that's providing care to anyone really. And sometimes there can be some factors about that. I think I'm just wanting to sort of call out the language of burnout a little bit, because when we say, you know, someone's burnt out or, you know, we're burnt out, what that sort of does is kind of puts the blame on the individual and saying like that individual kind of, you know, can't handle it or something like that. Or maybe it's some sort of personal deficit that they have as an employee or a staff member. And really what we want to say is that the impact of everything right now definitely is systemic, and that, you know, really a lot of our organizations, a lot of our agencies that people work for, or just the whole system overall, a lot of the responses people have are very, very normal, very, very expected in this kind of a situation that we're in right now. For a lot of us, we've never been in this kind of a pandemic before, anything similar sometimes in our lives at all. And so I just want to mention that really there is a huge responsibility on organizations, professions, and even our culture overall to be able to really acknowledge and take care of people, and saying that this isn't anyone's fault, you know, individually or personally, and that collectively we're really having this experience together. So really, next slide, please. When I thought about a big question of, you know, how do we be able to take care of ourselves? How do we lean into being compassionate and having capacity and not collapsing into chaos, crisis, and cynicism? Easier said than done. And again, this is not a, just do these 3 steps and everything will be, great and wonderful. Next slide, please. I'll just talk about a few sort of highlights and then we'll get into some ability to discuss some of this too. When I think about kind of the biggest things we can do around our own, within our own wheelhouse, I guess, being able to take care of our own nervous systems, take care of our own bodies and tapping in. I would say one of the biggest things that I see, not just in my private practice, but kind of everywhere, is how do we help people get connected from what's happening in their mind with their thoughts, maybe anxieties, just any worries, that type of thing. And how do we get more connected into the body, what's happening in the body, the movement in the body, the breath, just the fact that we have a body. Sometimes we even forget that. And that's what regulation is, being able to notice when things are coming in and not being in a Zen state all the time, but just how do we navigate through any kind of information that's coming in and then be able to kind of move it out again. And we know another thing too, because of being human, we also are really affected by the energies of other people. And we know that, we are very connected to others. And so it's not just about one person regulating in themselves in isolation, but also making sure that we have the ability to feel safe and regulated with other people around. So just wanting to mention some other sort of pieces around biological necessities on the next slide. So these things might seem really, really basic, but I'd just like you to kind of look through this slide and kind of think about how you're doing with this right now and how, how you're kind of, if you went through this list, have you been amazing with all of these things, or is there certain things that you're like, that's not really for me, or maybe I could, do a little bit better with that. I know one of the things for me that I do throughout the day is even just check in and just kind of see how I'm feeling and just kind of do a bit of a scan and just see how my breath is, or if if I have any tension anywhere. And the other thing is too, is if I haven't exercised or moved around or got up out of my seat, things like that, we can be able to just really have a bit of an assessment as to what we're doing there. And another thing too is being out in nature. I know that's really big for people, especially if you're in the city, is making sure that there's a little bit of time out there. So, and you can probably think too, when we have our breakout groups, if there's particular things that you would add to this list. So there's a couple other things I want to share with you guys too, if we can move on to the next slide. So some of you have probably heard of the window of tolerance, and that is something that sort of shows when we're under stress, how much we can be able to handle when we have, sort of certain levels of stress. And I actually am showing this other option here as compared to the window of tolerance. And I just really liked this. It's from Kathy Malchiodi from the States, and she's a trauma specialist. And what this talks about is how do we expand our capacity? So on one hand, one part of it there, it's like, how do we inhabit our body and mind with enlivenment, empowerment, self-compassion, and curiosity, and then be able to have in our body and mind self-regulation, co-regulation, and resilience. And I just really like this idea of capacity. And, these areas are presented within a kind of a circle because they're very much interrelated and they overlap. And that we know that these areas are really essential in reducing the impact of traumatic stress and being able to support, the restoration of our systems as whole as possible. So instead of thinking about stress and tolerating things, I really just like this idea of, how do we expand our capacity and how do we, continue to have, really good boundaries so we can keep giving out to other people. I'm just going to show a few more tips and tools on the next slide here. I won't go into these too much, but just a few highlights before we go into our discussion here. So one of the things is adjust your scope, and what that means is some of us have really high standards about how we should be doing things or what we should be accomplishing or how we should be as professionals. And sometimes we just need to dial that back a little bit and get real about kind of what our capacity is. Things around scheduling, doing one thing, you know, effectively. Maybe some people have practices around mindfulness. Non-judgment is a big one. I know for me, one of my cues is if I'm getting really judgy when I'm driving somewhere or if I'm standing in line at the grocery store, I'll have a moment of being like, oh, look at that. You're being a little judgy right now. What's happening? So I have this way of sort of having this bit of an inner reflection and dialogue with myself. Reframing, so looking at things from different angles and being able to, you know, kind of see things in different lights. Sometimes we need distraction, absolutely. Like, let's get real here. This isn't, you know, maybe the best time to be the most amazing person and do everything perfectly. Sometimes we need to have Netflix. Sometimes we need to do things that are maybe a little bit less healthy. Sometimes we just have to do that to be able to get through and get by. Catharsis and energy discharge. This isn't just, you know, going for a 10K run, but it could be anything that helps something move through your body. It could be laughing. It could be, you know, playing with your animals, anything like that. Just anything that helps that for sort of stuck feeling kind of move through the body. Body scans, ask what is happening for me right now. So that's kind of what I was mentioning before around, you know, just being able to say to yourself during the workday or at the end of the workday or as you get up in the morning or when you're talking to someone, like, how do I feel in my body right now? One particular tool that you can use is called SIFT. So it's looking at what sensations am I feeling? What images come to mind? What feelings am I having right now about this? And what thoughts are associated with this? So SIFT is just a nice way of being able to kind of have a bit of a structure for that. The other thing that's really important, and I'm sure everyone could comment on what they are using for this, is self-soothing. So being extra comfortable, bringing in coziness. You know, if we're sitting on a lot of Zoom meetings or having to go into work, having things that make us feel physically, emotionally, socially just really comfortable and just being unapologetic for those things. Just knowing that we need those. And another one too is knowing when you need to lean in. So be able to kind of stay with something, and even if it's uncomfortable, be able to still persist in the face of that. And then also, when do you need to just back off and have really good boundaries and be able to sort of protect yourself? Because we can't face all of the difficult things all the time. We have to take breaks and we have to be able to know when we've kind of hit a wall per se. And I'm sure people could add all kinds of things to that, and you'll get a chance to do that in a minute. So if we can move to the next slide. So we're going to talk about, and we're going to have some breakout groups here fairly soon, because I think it'll be really interesting to talk about, you know, some of the things maybe that have been coming to your mind so far around what's been happening for you, or maybe what you've been doing already, like how have you been coping? You know, are there things that you want to be able to bring in a little bit more? And just even being able to ask a bit of questions from colleagues that are going to be in your breakout groups too. So quite a bit of flexibility here with what kinds of questions. So if you think about the content that we've gone through so far, so what's been happening for you? How have you been feeling? And then what's been working? And if you want to talk about what hasn't been working, that's absolutely great too. So maybe we'll do about, how about we say, how many people do we have in our groups here? I'm just trying to see. Let's go for about 7 minutes, if that's okay with my co-facilitators here.
You got it. We can do 7 minutes.
All right.
Absolutely.
And hopefully that'll give people enough time to be able to speak. And then when you're done, you'll be asked to come back into the bigger group again.
Welcome back, everybody. I think everyone's back from our breakouts now.
Thanks. And just wanted to see how that went for people. If anybody has anything that they'd like to say around a bit of a reflection of how the dialogue was, and did you have enough time? Did you get it all figured out and fixed? I'm just kidding. Just a little bit of feedback, if you wouldn't mind either popping that in the chat or coming off mute.
One of the things that came up for our group, which I thought was really good, and we hadn't talked about it, is just laughter and really having a sense of humor throughout all this is really been helpful for a lot of people. So I thought that was kind of an interesting perspective to have. Like, you really just need sometimes to laugh.
And another group just discussing the importance of laughter. Great, thanks. Taking it day by day, absolutely. And as we're just thinking about this, it's kind of like we're not on animals yet. We're not looking for things that are, sort of taking it all away. But even in my group, someone was saying just cross stitching, like doing something really simple, one thing in the moment that just brings you into the present moment experience, like that's something that's totally within our control, right? So whatever that is for you, and it might seem really simple, but I think it can be profound to just be able to take a break from things. Aurora says, holdbacks on patient care. Well, I just missed, holdbacks on patient care, surgery bills keep coming in, most concerning. Just keep moving. Support from colleagues has been most helpful. Thank you. Focusing on something mindless. Doing dishes is sometimes relaxing. Absolutely. Absolutely. Just being able to give our brain that permission to take a break sometimes, right? Yeah. Great. Anyone have any other comments or things that came up? Music, for sure. Thank you all for that. And, it's really not about, again, I'm sure we all have different things that we're doing or different things that we're not doing. But I think just, the getting real part of actually asking yourselves, how am I doing? Can I do anything different? Even though there's these giant systemic things going on that are so much outside of any one person's control, what else can we do to be extra supportive of ourselves or other people around us? Kelsey's also saying about changing playlists and adding in some interesting things. Yeah, no, that's fantastic. And I think the other thing too, even just because this is what's happening right now, is how do we connect to people and like find out different interesting things, whether that's, everybody working virtually or, if it's in person, how do we find those really interesting moments of human connectedness despite all the chaos happening around? That's what that makes me think of. Thanks for sharing that. And Aurora says, journaling my thoughts and prayers. Yeah, absolutely. All right, we'll see if any other comments come in there, but I think what we'll do too, just in the interest of time, we can open it up to any questions you might have, or any other comments or anything that I know I feel like I went through some of the content really quickly, but just wondering if anybody has anything that they'd like to bring up. Either feel free to put that in the chat, or if you want to come off mute, if there's anything that comes to mind that you thought we'd be talking about that we didn't get a chance to have specifically discussed yet tonight.
Yeah, there's this, giant system and societal thing we're going through, and how, you can do individual things, but sometimes I think you were in our group, and sometimes I worry about the whole profession or all of the people, that are working, trying to care for people, and how are we going? How do we support each other in a, almost in a meso level? So there's the individual stuff, but how can organizations, how do we support each other in a more formal way, maybe? Because it's, there's going to be a lot of moral injury, and I love the, the suggestions. I am a person that lives, out in the country, so I have contact with nature every day. I can just walk out into the mountains, but not everyone has that. And I don't know if you have any thoughts on, how do we support that wellness, or taking yeah, taking care of each other in a bigger way within our organizations or our colleagues, and seeing how we can support each other.
I love that right now, as you're talking about that question, Kathy, we have, I can see Kelsey, I'm just picking on you right now, not picking on you. I just love that she's embracing her daughter right now. She's got this lovely hug happening there right now. I just love seeing that. And I think that's actually really quite relevant. Like, how do we take care of ourselves so we can also mobilize and organize and sort of action forth about, like, if we feel like we have our own capacity or we can make a difference somehow, like, what does that mean? Not just for the individual, but also collectively. And so, I mean, that makes me think of, is that something that we're able to do within our, you know, our work experiences with our colleagues, making systemic changes, or is it also like reaching out to our family members or our neighbors, or like other ways that can kind of show up? So I don't know, what do people think about that one? Like that question that Kathy posed is, and absolutely I agree, it's not just about, you know, the individual responsibility, but then what else can we do to be able to help build community in whatever way, shape, or form that sort of you know, that's possible for all of us, right? What do you guys think? Aurora says monthly meetings in the park, lunch gatherings in the park, being able to, you know, it makes me think too, like maybe your comment there is like, does it have to be something formal, or can it be informal? Right? Like sometimes we think it has to be this big thing, and then sometimes our most important, profound, you know, meaningful interactions are actually really small. But I don't know. I think, Leah, you have got your hand up.
Yeah, I was just thinking about, like, you know, when you're working so closely, like on the front line of doing, like, you know, if you're a physician or a nurse, you do kind of feel like it would be nice if you felt supported from your organization, like in some type of wellness that isn't just like, you know, kind of, it's almost like the burnout thing, is that you're in, like, you know, it's not your fault, but and also then it's not always just your responsibility either. Like, it would be nice if it felt like it was you know, an organization really cared about their workers' wellness, you know, and I know that lots of organizations do, but it almost feels like we need to do extra now to just kind of you know, kind of pay attention to that, because otherwise people will be, you know, ready to go and not wanting to come back to work if they, you know, if they even can get away ever. But it would be nice to feel that kind of recognition, I guess, from organizations.
Absolutely. And changing some of the structures and the conditions, not just expecting that it falls on the individual. Yeah. And I think, you know, how much is in everyone's, you know, personal, you know, kind of capacity or possibility to be able to have some of those conversations too. And I think you're absolutely right. You know, what you guys are saying too is, you know, depending on your leadership, depending on the organization, are there, you know, listening ears? Is there, you know, sort of safety to be able to have those conversations? And is it going to go somewhere too, right? Absolutely. I'm just looking at a couple more of the comments here. Someone said checking in more often about how your colleagues are doing, and just, you know, how are you really doing? And I think in being realistic about that, because sometimes, you know, sometimes we have space for that, and other times it's like, I just got to do me because that's all I got for the day, right? So just being really real about that. Another comment was use the AMA joint task force to advocate for ourselves and our patients. And also finding ways to celebrate things. We still have wins, even if they aren't fixing the big problems we're facing. Just taking time to appreciate what we're doing and saying it out loud to those that need to hear it. Another comment, being kind isn't always easy, but it is important. Yeah, right. And And I think that's why, like, having that lens of, if we're not in a place to be kind and we're feeling really, stressed, what do we need to do? Like, we can't always be, muffins and kittens and roses and everything's great, right? But if we just need to recognize, like, what sort of self-reflective process do we need to have? Because I think that, it feels gross when we know that we're not being kind, right? That's not why we got into this profession, to not be kind and caring. Yeah. Just seeing if there's any other comments that I missed there. I think there was one about a Zoom coffee break. I might have missed that.
Yeah, I think you're right that, those informal connections are really important, and in the Zoom and with virtual care, I'm sure lots of people are missing that with their patients and doing lots of things in a new and different way. And sometimes I think it's helpful to sort of think about, what lesson we can take from this experience to make things better, instead of thinking about how you might have noticed I catastrophize, but like, I'm just thinking of my colleagues, that are slugging it out in the ICUs right now, and then how do we take what we've learned and make the system better, and maybe start concentrating on that, and then try to avoid those negative influences. I like what Ted said, being kind isn't always easy, but I always know that when I'm really mad because everyone seems to be, not very bright, it's usually because I'm a judge and the problem is me. And so that's the self-reflection, right?
Yeah. And I think too, while it's like we need that, passion and that drive and getting things done and making the changes, right? Like the big picture changes, but also, sometimes saying, like, it's sometimes we can just say, like, I'm doing enough, I gotta have massive empathy, around what's happening right now. And there's just a couple of good comments coming in there too about just kind of perspective, finding sort of small things, camaraderie, unity. Yeah, that community piece, absolutely too, right? Finding small wins, even if we're not fixing the big problems, taking time to appreciate people. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's great.
And also what Kelsey has said there, often to remind us what is within your circle of influence and what isn't.
Mm-hmm.
You might not be able to have world peace. And so, it's really, those small wins and reminding your scope. And also, I think what you said right at the beginning, Kerry, was, the boundary. You have to be well yourself. And sometimes that's really, really hard to make those hard decisions. And I think people have really struggled with that, to step back from various things, just to stay well, so they can really do a good job.
Yeah, it makes me think of a Brene Brown quote she talks about the people that have the most compassion have the best boundaries, which is, when you think about it, could be counterintuitive, but actually it makes sense, right? If you really take care of yourself and kind of know, kind of where your seat is, then you can give out more to others, and it's going to be really, it's going to be lined up a bit better. Yeah. Yeah. Well, thank you very much. I just have one more slide. Speaking of animals, and these are like two of my furry children anyways, and I have two other ones that are the human children, but just thought I'd put in this funny slide because those animals are really cute that I have. So that's just like a fun little moment there for you. Just like to thank everyone for coming out tonight and making time for this. And if anyone has any questions or follow-up, because in the interest of connecting and community, I'm always happy if anybody has any questions afterwards or anything like that, feel free to reach out. And I believe that the slides will be shared and the presentation recorded. I apologize about not having my video on the whole time, but I think that's how we just had to do that technically. So thank you all so much for your time and participation.
Yes, thank you all. And please, if you have time, can you fill out the evaluation and any suggestions for further topics? Our next session is October 28th, and it's Challenging Stigma in Your Practice. There'll be some really interesting tools to take a look at your own practice. And we have Jesse David Murray from the Edmonton Men's Health Collective talking about a study they had done within their clients and their access to mental health services, as well as to family doctors and to community pharmacists and the stigma they face. So stay tuned. Thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone. We so appreciate your time, and thank you to Kerry for the wonderful presentation. We're going to stay on the call for just a moment. So if you guys want to go into the bottom right-hand corner of your screen and find that red leave button, we'll leave that to you. Enjoy the rest of your Thursday evening, everyone.